Welcome to the Essentially You podcast. Dr. Tom O'Brien, how are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. Very well, very well. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. I have been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. It is such a blessing. And, you are, I consider to be like one of the Sherlock Holmes when it comes to chronic conditions. And an area that my ladies are looking for is what are some of the biggest root causes of hormone issues? And one of the things that you've been able to pinpoint was the onslaught of toxins that we are being just bombarded with every single day. So can you talk to me a little bit about why the actual hormone imbalance is not the thing to focus on? It's really the deeper issue.
Well, yeah, hormone imbalances need to be addressed, obviously, because they affect how we think, they affect how we feel, our motivation, our action potential, if you will. And when there's a hormone imbalance, the first thing we always want to do is feel better. And that's fine. Of course we want to feel better, but going for feeling better is not going to fix the problem that caused the eventual and that's the key word, is eventual, the eventual manifestation of hormone imbalances. So just feeling better, take some testosterone, guys, you're going to feel better. Of course, or estrogen for women, or estrogen, progesterone, or whatever the hormones are. Once you've tested and identified a deficiency, I am a strong advocate of hormone therapy when you have a deficiency of the hormone. But if you take hormones without testing to see, do I need to take hormones? Because your doctor says, well, you got all these symptoms. You probably have an estrogen deficiency. You're in your late 30s. It could be an early change of life. And they give you the yabba, yabba, yabba. And let's just get you on some estrogen and progesterone and see how you feel. That's extremely dangerous, because if you don't have a hormone insufficiency or a hormone deficiency, and you take extra hormones in your body, it's going to be an excess because there wasn't a deficiency. Now, the symptoms suggest, well, you've got this problem with your list of symptoms really suggests estrogen's not working very well, and lots of women that take estrogen feel better. Okay, doc, can we test my estrogen? Well, we don't really do that here. Well, then I need to find a new doc, because, excuse me, but it's such a, if I can use the word, a bastardized approach that so many practitioners are taking now, because it's simple. You write a script, patient takes the hormones, they feel better, their skin looks better. But in 4 years, they're diagnosed with a hormone-related cancer or some other complications that can develop. So the first point is always, it's okay to take extra hormones if you have a deficiency of that hormone. And that will help you feel better. And that's really important. But if you have a deficiency of the hormone and you take hormones to feel better, you have to ask the question, why do I have a deficiency of the hormone? Doctor, say, well, it just happens, it's life and stress, or it's stress. And they nod their head, it's stress. So you go, oh, okay. And you nod back and then you forget about it because they told you it's not stress. Stress can certainly fuel the fire, but that's not the mechanism. That can be a contributing factor. I don't want to downplay it, but it's not the mechanism that caused the hormone insufficiency or hormone deficiency that you may have. So that's the first category. When you have a hormone insufficiency or deficiency, absolutely take the hormones, absolutely, for a period of time while you're working on getting your body to deal with why you had the insufficiency or deficiency. That's one category. The second category is when you do the testing for a hormone imbalance and you don't have a hormone deficiency. And if you take hormones when you don't have a deficiency, by definition, you're going to have an excess of hormones. And when you have an excess, which is more than your receptors can handle. Now, receptors are like catcher's mitts. The pitcher throws the ball to the catcher. And every hormone has receptors on every cell that needs that hormone. That's how the hormone gets inside the cell, is that the receptors are sitting facing into the bloodstream. And so when progesterone's going by, there's like a magnetic pull that pulls progesterone into the progesterone receptor site. It's like a lock and key mechanism that opens the door to the cell, and the progesterone can go inside the cell. Or with thyroid hormone, it's the same way. Or with any other hormone, there are receptors, catcher's mitts, that pull the hormone into the lock, unlock the lock, open the cell door, and the hormone could go inside the cell to do what it's supposed to do. When you have an excess of hormones, which means you tested, you don't have an insufficiency or deficiency, but they're giving you hormones anyway, and you take them and you feel better, so you forget about it because, oh, I'm feeling better. Mm-hmm. But now you have an excess amount in your bloodstream, more than what the receptors can handle. That's when you start triggering hormone-related imbalances that may not show for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, but those are cancers. Those are degenerative conditions. It can contribute to the development of autoimmune diseases. So that's the first concept we need to understand is your doctor says you've got, or you read an article that the symptoms you're having say that you've got a hormone insufficiency or deficiency. You need hormones. Okay, well, let's test to confirm that to see. They're not expensive tests. And if they say no, they're not going to test you for, they're just going to shotgun, say, thank you so much, and you go find a new doctor. Critically important to know what you're dealing with. So that's the first concept, Mariza, is that we have to confirm there's a deficiency before we start prescribing and giving hormones to patients.
Well, and Dr. Tom, real quick, because I know a lot of doctors, even the type of testing, I know we don't want to get into all of that, but let's even say that if we are dealing with toxins and let's say the test is showing, a decline in a particular estrogen, maybe it's estradiol, or maybe we see an uptick in estradiol. So we may think that, oh, you have a significant amount of estrogen. We need to bring in progesterone to balance things out. But that doesn't tell us always the entire picture as well, because with toxins, we could have a receptor issue. We could have a liver issue. We could have a detoxification problem. And that could be skewing the numbers.
That's the next point.
Yeah.
The next point is when you don't have a deficiency or an insufficiency, but you feel better taking hormones. Well, why is that? Because you're shotgunning, you're blasting it in, which means it's not getting into the cells on its own very well. Mm-hmm. So you can have all the hormone in the bloodstream that you want, but if it's not getting into the cells, then you're not going to get the benefits of that hormone. The classic example, the very classic, is thyroid hormone. And there are so many studies that show this, that there are 3 chemicals that have an affinity get pulled into the thyroid receptor. And they just sit there. They don't get broken down or they don't unlock the lock. They just go into the lock so that thyroid hormone coming in can't get in, because the receptor is full of chlorine or bromide or fluoride. And so that's classic. When people have thyroid symptoms, pretty obvious thyroid symptoms, somebody reads a list and say, oh, I've got that, no, yes, no, yes. Wow, I've got 14 of the 18 symptoms that they list. I've got a thyroid problem, but your thyroid blood tests are completely normal. Then you're dealing with some kind of an emergency brake. And what do I mean by that? You're backing out of the driveway and you say, what's wrong with this car? I'm giving it gas, it's moving, but it's not moving the emergency brake. And you let go of the emergency brake and now you back out completely. So when you have adequate hormone, but you have the symptoms of hormone insufficiency or deficiency, you've got an emergency brake on your hormones working properly. And that is the category where so very often, a vast majority of the time, it's toxic chemicals that are sitting in those receptor sites, whether it's estrogen receptor sites. That's why 15, 20 years ago, scientists started identifying some of these chemicals in a category that they call endocrine disruptors, meaning hormones, the endocrine, your hormonal related system in the body is being disrupted by these chemicals. I mean, it's shocking when you see how many chemicals a woman puts on her body every day. Whether it's an underarm deodorant, how many chemicals are in that one, or the shampoos and you're breathing it in, going right up to your brain, how many chemicals are in that one, or the soaps or the nail polish, and the phthalates are in your bloodstream in 4 to 5 minutes, how many chemicals are in that one? The amount of chemicals that we're being exposed to, never before in history have humans been exposed to this, and we have no defense mechanism. You have the exact same body as your ancestors thousands of years ago. The kidneys work the same way, the gallbladder the same way, the immune system the same way. Our bodies work we use our brains more, so we've learned how to grow food and store food and refrigerate and housing to keep us warm in the winter and all of that, but we have the same physiology. And the immune system works exactly the same as your ancestors' immune system. So, okay, so what? Well, your ancestors, what threatened your ancestors? There were only 6 things: bugs, parasites, viruses, mold, fungus, and bacteria. That's it. There was no red dye number 42 that's in lipstick. There was no bisphenol A that's in the water when you drink water from plastic bottles. There was none of that. So when we're exposed to chemicals, usually it's such a minor amount, and if you want, we'll talk about the politics about why they're here, but it's a minor amount and it doesn't bother you. Your immune system doesn't recognize it. It can't, because it can only recognize bugs, parasites, viruses, mold, fungus, and bacteria. But these chemicals, they accumulate in your body. So I'd like to give you an example of that, and then I'll continue with the immune system part. Chicago, 2016, 346 pregnant women in the 8th month of pregnancy. They did urine tests, 8th month of pregnancy urine tests, and they measured 5 different phthalates. Phthalates are chemicals used to mold plastic. And bisphenol A, BPA, is one of those, and there are many, but they measured 5. And they divided them into the women into how much of these phthalates did they have into 4 categories: the lowest, the next, the third, and the highest. They then followed the offspring of those pregnancies for 7 years. And when the children turned 7 years old, they did Wechsler IQ tests on them, the official IQ test. What did they find? You know, there's not much in medicine that's all or every. This was every. Every child whose mother was in the highest category of phthalates in urine in pregnancy, every child, compared to the ones whose mothers were in the lowest category of these 346 women, every child in the highest category, their IQ was 7 points lower, 6.7 to 7.4 points lower. Now, that doesn't mean anything to anyone until you understand that a 1-point difference in IQ is noticeable, and a 7-point difference is a difference between a child working really hard, getting straight A's in school, and a child working really hard, getting straight C's in school. This child doesn't have a chance in hell of ever excelling in school. Not possible, because their brain never developed properly. Now go to Google and type in phthalates, PHTHALATES, phthalates and neurogenesis, nerve growth. Here come the studies. The higher the amount of phthalates, the lower the brain cell and nerve cell growth. So these children whose mothers are in the highest category of these chemicals, the brains of these children never developed in utero completely. That's just one small example. And there are many, many studies like this about brain cell development and nerve development, which occurs. So it's the accumulation of these chemicals over the years, you give me a little girl at 5 years old that's painting her 10 little fingers and 10 little toes. It's so cute. And there's no evidence that the amount of phthalates that leach into the bloodstream from that nail polish is toxic to humans. There's no evidence of that. That's how the chemical industry gets away with this. But this accumulates, and she does this once a week for 25 years or more often as she gets into her teenage years. Now you cross a line of tolerance. Now there's so much of this stuff affecting how your cells develop. The immune system gets activated trying to protect you. And when it tries to protect you, it can only operate as if it's a bug, parasite, virus, mold, fungus, or bacteria, which means it creates inflammation, because inflammation kills the bug, parasite, virus, mold, fungus, or bacteria. That's the job of inflammation, is to protect you. Your immune system's trying to protect you. So it's the accumulated chemicals that develop inside of mom, activating the immune system, trying to protect her, creating the inflammation that inhibits the brain cell growth and development for that baby. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example of hundreds of, it's overwhelming.
Well, that's an example of in utero. You think about
right.
Once the babies get out into the world, you and I both have little boys at almost the exact same age, and just the amount of plastic for children and babies, to keep them safe, they don't break glass. We've gone through such great lengths to only use glass and only use stainless steel. And, it's incredible. Like for the most people, I walk around at the zoo, we go to the San Diego Zoo a lot, and I just look to see what other families are using. It's almost always, it's all plastic. And some nasty plastic too, like some cheap,
the cheap stuff and the chemicals in there leach out so much easier, right? Yeah. We use silicone for our boy, silicone cup, silicone plate, and silicone spoons and things, because they don't leach. Now, if they get in your body, silicone implant, that's a big problem because those can break. But in terms of a plate or a cup, I can't find any evidence that it leaches any of that.
It doesn't. I know some silicone sometimes, and always be mindful, always be looking out that sometimes they will mix plastic with silicone. They will. Right. And so just double check if you're buying, especially for your family, cups, plates, these types of things, especially for your little ones. Just be on the lookout for those types of things, just because I found that they'll say it's food grade silicone, and it's not. So we're really just to be mindful about, but it's, we think about all the things, not only we're putting on our skin, we're putting on our children's skin, not only having an effect neurologically, but also endocrine wise and metabolically. We see
these chemicals accumulate in the receptor sites. That's why they're called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so then the estrogen can't get into the cell. The testosterone can't get into the testes for the little boy when he's 7, 8, 9 and starting to produce testosterone at measurable levels. It just can't get in and do the job it's supposed to do very well. And it's like a dimmer switch. It's not an on-off switch. It's either working perfectly or it's not. It's a dimmer switch. And some tissues get dimmed down more, so they can't function very well. Whereas other testosterone tissues, in my example, they still are, even with a little bit of testosterone getting through the receptor site, it helps and you don't see any symptoms. So it's on a dimmer switch. The Journal Pediatrics published this paper. It was from the board of the American Academy of Pediatrics, not just one author. So this was a message from the board of arguably the largest medical organization for healthcare for children in the world. And this message was to go out to everyone. And they said that the Toxic Substance Control Act failed miserably to protect our children. And then they went on to explain how these chemicals accumulate in a child's body and inhibit that child's growth and development. And in there, the article identified that it was 27 trillion pounds of chemicals manufactured or imported into the United States every year. Now, that number means absolutely nothing to me. I've got no reality on that at all. What does that mean? I didn't know. So I divided 27 trillion by the population of the United States. I think it was 330 million, whatever the number was. So I got that. And that's the amount of chemicals per person per year. And I divided that by 365 days. And it comes out to 247 pounds of chemicals per person per day that are manufactured or imported into the United States. That's 5 50-pound bags a day per person. Where does this stuff go? Well, it's in your house. You know, we're in a hotel right now. It's in this desk, which is fake wood. You know, it's pressboard that's soaked in formaldehyde, and they compress all this sawdust and stuff together, and the varnish that's on top of it, and this fake wood floor that I'm looking at, or the flame retardant chemicals in the sheets that you sleep on here, and the blankets or the pillows. The amount of chemicals we're exposed to is going up exponentially every year. And we think, oh, it's okay, it's safe. If it was a problem, our government would protect us. No, they don't. And never before. This is why I'm going to give you two statistics that are jaw-dropping. The first one, that may mean nothing to most people, but believe me, it's jaw-dropping, is that every autoimmune disease that they check is going up 4 to 9% per year, every year. 4 to 9% a year for every one of these autoimmune diseases. That's the first statistic. The second one is from Blue Cross Blue Shield, arguably the largest for-profit health insurance company in the world, in the English language. And they published in March of 2020, they said, we got a problem here. In a 4-year period from 2013 to 2017, in that 4-year period, there was a 407% increase in the diagnosis of early Alzheimer's, 407% in 30 to 44-year-olds.
Oh my gosh, that's a
Exactly. It's like, oh my God. Not a 10% increase in 4 years, a 407% increase. And it's a talk I give all over the world on stage. It's called The Canary in the Coal Mine. And the brain is the canary in the coal mine. And that comes from that back in the 1800s, coal miners would take a canary down in the mine with them. And they put a little candle there, so the canary's singing songs all day. If the canary stops singing, somebody goes over and checks. If the bird has fallen over dead in the cage, they blow a whistle and everyone gets out of there immediately, because canaries are very sensitive to methane and carbon monoxide, and humans can't smell it. And so if they stayed down there, they would die, right? So the canary in the coal mine is a phrase that means an early warning system of imminent danger. And it's the brain that is the canary in the coal mine of the body for the amount of inflammation that we're being exposed to and how it's damaging and destroying our tissue, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. And the result is, I'm sure you've had conversations with many of your friends. Oh, I'm getting older. I don't remember the way I used to. Ha ha ha. How old are you? Well, I'm 36. No, that's not supposed to happen. That is not supposed to happen. That is an early warning system of excessive amounts of inflammation, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about the function of the testes and producing testosterone, the function of the ovaries producing estrogen, progesterone, the function of the adrenals taking over for the ovaries when you go through menopause, producing estrogen and progesterone, the function of the thyroid, producing thyroid hormone. This danger is accumulating in every endocrine system of our body, because these chemicals, they're endocrine disruptors. They sit in the receptor site for that hormone. And then the hormone can't get into the lock and open the door and get into the cell so the cell can do whatever it's supposed to do with that hormone.
Mm. And so it's interesting, I always think of the hormones as being the canary in the coal mine because they tend to be the first kind of letting us know something is not right. But I hadn't thought of the brain as the canary in the coal mine, but we're starting to see, and as you mentioned, I think this is the generation where we really start to see a massive accumulation from in utero all the way through. And just that accumulation is just adding up sooner because it happens sooner.
Well, because babies are being born more toxic than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen the studies, it's 280 chemicals in the umbilical cord blood at birth that aren't supposed to be there.
Well, and children have allergies and they have gut issues and they have, autism and ADHD, but it doesn't have to be the big ones that we're thinking about when it comes to children. It could just be rashes. It could just be, like I said, allergies and earaches and things that seem like, oh, whatever, not a big deal. But over time, this accumulation turns into something else. And now we see girls in puberty with PCOS and struggling with severe menstrual cycle issues and really severe PMS symptoms that we've never seen before, like not at this level, or girls starting their periods much earlier than they used to.
Exactly. It's 4 to 9% a year increase every year. And you hit it right on the head. This is why it's happening. So every listener, my suggestion, allocate 1 hour a week to learning a little more. How do I detox my family's bodies and our home? How do we reduce the amount of toxins in the home? And then you learn from NASA that NASA, and most people don't know this, our astronauts were going loopy in space. They had lots of brain fog, and they never talked about it with the press, but why? They couldn't figure out what's going on. Is it the stratosphere? Is it the lack of oxygen? What is it? No, it's the amount of chemicals from all the plastic that's in a spacecraft. The metals don't outgas much, but everything, the coverings, they're all plastic. It's phthalates. And so NASA did the studies looking at houseplants. Can houseplants help?
These are new rocket ships, just kind of like a new car. If you buy a new car, ask how long it's been on the lot. See if it's been off-gassing for a couple of months. Don't buy the one that just got there 2 days ago. And even still, off-gas it every single freaking second you've got for months and months and months. But I'm guessing these rocket ships, they're not off-gassing these rocket ships.
They are not off-gassing. And with the example of a new car, since 1984, I've been buying negative ion generators that go in the cigarette lighter socket of the car. And they're on Amazon. It's like $50. And you put one in there, you get a little blue light on it. And what negative ions do inside your car is that they put a little static in the air. So all of the particulate matter in the air clumps together and it gets too heavy to float. So it drops down onto the carpet or onto the dashboard, but it's not in the air. You aren't breathing it. That's why people always get in my cars and say, wow, your car smells so new. And it's fresh, it's refreshed. And it's the negative ion generators that are just taking all that particulate matter from the diesel fumes on the expressway or heavy cigarette lighters. So I've got 3 negative ion generators in the car. And it's really fun to drive now, in our car because it just feels so fresh. And, we like it. But that's just a simple little thing on the checklist. And what you need to learn as the matriarch of your family or patriarch of your family is first realize there's 100 little tidbits like that you need to learn. And it's overwhelming, but you just take one at a time. So you go on Amazon and you order the negative ion generators. You only have to do it once and then it's done. Until, forever.
I like these things where you even just only have to do it once. But I know you were talking about houseplants too. And I wanted you to finish that because NASA had to figure out the brain fog issue because, I imagine they were having migraines. They were probably having all kinds of issues, having to breathe all that in that small enclosed space.
Exactly. And NASA found that 2 6-inch houseplants in a 10 by 10 room absorb over 70% of the toxins in the air. And at nighttime, they generate oxygen into the air. So your kids' bedrooms should have lots of houseplant, 2, 3, 4 houseplants. Every room of your house. If you've got 8 rooms in your house, you go buy 20 houseplants, 6-inch houseplants. They're like $5 each, something like that. And if you can't afford it, you buy 2 for your kid's bedroom, and then your bedroom's next. And when you can afford it, you get an air purifier for the house. And you just take these baby steps. So you go to my website, thedr.com/plant. There's the handout from NASA with the name of the plants. And, we made it really pretty with the pictures. And, oh, I know those houseplants. That's mother-in-law's tongue. That's right. Those little straight leaf things that go up like this. They're called mother-in-law's tongue. And they absorb lots of toxins in the air. And it's a no-brainer to take care of them. You just water them once every 2 weeks and keep them out of direct sun, and they're happy.
Oh yeah, there's so many great houseplants that you really have to try extremely hard to kill.
Right.
A lot of them you absolutely will not kill some of these houseplants.
That's right. But if you do, you go buy more.
You can replace them. Very, very inexpensive. We have 4 in here. We have 3 in my son's room. We have at least 3 in every single room of the house.
Yes.
And it's not, they're nice.
They are nice. It adds an aura to the air. I don't want to get airy-fairy about it, but it really
hotels
adds.
would have houseplants in them.
I read a book back in the 70s called The Secret Life of Plants. It was a great big thick thing. And I'll never forget this. They did one study where they hooked a plant up to like a lie detector that was determining the electrical current going through the plant. And they just measured it. There were like 6 or 8 of them in the room. One was measured, like being measured. And a guy came in with a machete and just chopped up all the plants, except for that one that was being measured. And it showed this plant went into shock, whatever that looks like on an EEG machine, but it went into shock. And then the guy left and the plant settled down after a while. And 2 months later, I think it was 2 months or some time later, but extensive amount of time later, the same guy walks back in the room for the first time. The plant went into shock just with the guy walking in the room. And I can't fathom that. I was like, what? And then there's another story about the farmer whose apple tree wasn't producing apples one spring, the buds for apples. So he went out there with a shotgun filled with salt and just blasted it. And then the tree started producing flowers afterwards. So, who knows how all this works. But the idea that plants create an aura in a room is so well established, that people just feel better when there are plants around, and they're going to clean the air. So that's one of the things you can do to reduce the exposure of toxic chemicals that you and your family are being exposed to every day. Another thing, you can make your own house cleaners, like your furniture polish, instead of using Pledge, because Pledge has got all that list of chemicals in it that are just nasty for you. You can make your own glass cleaner instead of using Windex. You can make your own floor cleaners. And my books have, all of that. So you or you just buy like organic or consciously made stuff, but you start to understand that what you bring into your home, you're exposing your family to this stuff. Well, it says it's not too bad for you. Wait a minute, just read about that one chemical in that product you're bringing in. So you just Google a chemical, you go, oh my God, cancer, autoimmune disease, wow. Well, I don't want to expose my family to that. And it'll just be so overwhelming to you how often that's going to be the response that you have when you start really investigating what you're bringing into your family's home.
Agreed, 100%. And I know that a big part of, the impact of toxins is, I want to specifically address the impact of toxins on the gut. And I know that you have a gut reboot guide for us, but yeah, could you just connect the dots here? I know people know that toxins are absolutely messing with our gut microbiome. It's causing leaky gut. And I know this is a huge piece. If we can address some of these gut issues and also obviously get rid of some of these environmental toxins, we are definitely set up for more success.
Absolutely. Professor Alessio Fasano at Harvard, we think this guy's going to win the Nobel Prize. We truly do. He and his team in 1997 identified how a leaky gut occurs, what the proteins are that get made and create a leaky gut. And they've been publishing about that ever since. And this is what they're teaching now at Harvard Medical School, is that 14 of the top 15 causes of death in the US today are chronic inflammatory diseases. It's always inflammation, except for unintentional injuries, like an accident. Everything else is a chronic inflammatory disease. And what they're teaching at Harvard is that there are 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. That for a chronic inflammatory disease to occur, 14 of the top 15 causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. For a chronic inflammatory disease to occur, 5 things happen. There are 5 contributing factors. The first one is your genetics. Mrs. Patient, if I pull at a chain, it always breaks at the weakest link. It could be at one end, the middle, the other end, it's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidney, wherever your genetic weak link is. And it's your genes, and here's a geek term, antecedents, which means how you lived your life. Mm-hmm. For example, you eat tuna 3 times a week, tuna fish, you got mercury poisoning because almost all the tuna is high in mercury now. So it's the antecedents and your genetics that determine where the weak link is, okay? And you can't turn genes on and off. It's not possible. We've said that for years. Well, let's turn those genes off. You can't turn genes off. Genes operate on a dimmer switch, and you can dim them down. The genes of inflammation, you can dim them down. The genes of breast cancer, the BRCA1 gene, you can dim it down. Or the genes for Alzheimer's, you can dim them down. And you ramp up the genes of anti-inflammation. That's the target here. Dim down whatever your weak link is in the chain, dim those genes down and ramp up the protective genes of anti-inflammation. That's the goal. But that's how you think about genetics. So any doctor that says to you, well, you've got the gene, so for breast cancer and your grandmother died of breast cancer, so let's do surgery and take the breast because you've got the gene. Nonsense. That is a historic misconception before all the science came out of how do you dim down genes? How do you quiet them down? Now we know. So that's genetics. That's the first pillar. The second pillar are the environmental triggers, what we're exposed to, the chemicals, the foods. The most common source of environmental triggers is what's on the end of your fork. Mm-hmm. That's most common, right? But the environmental triggers have their hands on the dimmer switch, ramping up genes or calming down genes. And so which genes get affected is determined by what foods you eat. And that, bottom line, that's it. And there's many reasons why we all should be organic, and maybe we'll talk about that. But that's the second pillar, is environmental triggers. Okay, I understand that. Okay, so anything that me and my children are exposed to has an effect on the genes in our body to calm down or ramp up genes. That's correct. That's all you need to know about genetics. That's all you need to know. And so, okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, when the environmental triggers are activating inflammation, you change the environment of the microbiome, the balance of good guys and bad guys in the gut. When you change the balance so that there are too many bad guys, not enough good guys, that's called dysbiosis. It's another geek word. Dysbiosis, of too many bad guys, not enough good guys. Now, here's a cute little fact with dysbiosis. If I exercise too hard one day, pumping iron, the next day my muscles are sore, right? And it's because there's too much lactic acid. My body didn't get rid of all of the exhaust from the muscle cells. It's called lactic acid. all of the bacteria in your gut, the trillions of bacteria in your gut, they all produce exhaust. Like muscle cells produce lactic acid.
Mhm.
They all produce exhaust. The exhaust is called the metabolites of the microbiome. 36% of all the small molecules in the bloodstream are the exhaust of the microbiome. 36% of everything are the messengers, the exhaust from the bacteria in your gut. And so if you have too many bad guys in the gut, you got dysbiosis, then the messengers, the metabolites going through the bloodstream, see, these metabolites, they've got their hands on the steering wheel of the direction of your body's health. When you have dysbiosis, so the messengers in the bloodstream are more bad inflammatory messages than good non-inflammatory messages. When you have too many bad messages in your bloodstream, you've turned your steering wheel 5 degrees in the direction of your body's health. Well, what does that mean? Well, just drive down the highway and turn the steering wheel 5 degrees. What happens within 100 yards? You're off the road. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means you've got so much inflammation in your brain right now that you can't remember the way you used to, or whatever the symptoms are that are coming up because there's too much inflammation going through your system, right? So that's the metabolites that come from the microbiome in your gut. That's number 3. So number 1 was the genetics. Number 2 are the environmental triggers. Number 3 is when they cause dysbiosis, creating all these bad messages. Number 4 is the dysbiosis in your gut creates leaky gut. Now, what's leaky gut? What is it? Mrs. Patient, your digestive system is a tube. Starts at the mouth, goes to the other end. Kind of winds around in the center there, about 20, 25 feet. The inside of the tube is lined with cheesecloth. Now, why is that? Because when you swallow food, it's in the tube. It's not in the body yet. It's in the tube. You know, if you think of a donut, if you could stretch a donut out, one big long donut, and you look down the center of the hole and you put something in the hole, it's in the donut. It's not outside in the body yet. The food has to go through the walls of the donut, through the walls of the tube to get into the bloodstream. That's what digestion is breaking down your food into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, teeny tiny pieces, until they're so small, they go right through the cheesecloth lining the inside of the gut into the bloodstream. But what happens when you have dysbiosis, meaning too many bad guys in the gut, not enough good guys, that's number 3, you create the leaky gut. You create tears in the cheesecloth. So the inflammation inside the gut from the dysbiosis, because of so many environmental triggers activating inflammation, creating this dysbiosis, now you've got the tears in the cheesecloth. Now larger molecules of the good food that you're eating get through the tears in the cheesecloth and go into the bloodstream. They're called macromolecules. They're not supposed to get in until they've been broken down smaller and smaller and smaller, but they squeeze through the tears in the cheesecloth. These macromolecules get into the bloodstream and your immune system says, whoa, what's that? That's not supposed to be here. That's not something I can use to make new muscle cells or new brain cells. I better fight that. Now, that creates number 5, systemic inflammation. Your immune system gets activated to protect you because these macromolecules got through the tears in the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. And now the immune system has to fight the chicken or fight the strawberries or fight the oregano. It doesn't matter what the food is. If it gets in through the tears in the cheesecloth, through the leaky gut, your immune system trying to protect you is going to cause systemic inflammation. And that's what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School, the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases, the cause of 14 of the 15 top causes of death in the world today. So these environmental triggers, our topic today that we're talking about is about toxic chemicals.
Yep.
That's what you're asking me about, toxic chemicals. They are a critically important category of pillar number 2, environmental triggers. But when you understand the big picture, you start to understand where these chemicals fit into the picture, right?
Yeah.
It's dysbiosis in the gut because these chemicals, well, let's say the artificial sweeteners, they kill off the good guys in your gut and they feed the bad guys. It's a bottom line. That's what they do. Deep fried foods, they kill the good guys in your gut and they increase the bad guys. Bottom line, so what do you mean deep fried French fries? Yes, French fries, onion rings, anything that's deep fried. Not that you can't have any, but you certainly can't eat them regularly.
Right.
You just have to learn. And it's going to take time to learn all of the exposures that up until now you have considered normal and healthy food and healthy cosmetics and a healthy house. The furniture that you buy for your house. Up to now, you've thought all this stuff was healthy because, well, our government certainly would protect us from anything that's toxic. No, they don't.
No.
Do you know that article in Pediatrics I told you about? After that article got published, the chemical industry lobbied for 3 years so that the EPA could never accumulate those kinds of numbers again. So the chemical industry does not have to report how much of a chemical they make or what they're importing. They don't have to summarize it. And the government doesn't have the numbers anymore. So that 247 pounds per person per day, that article in Pediatrics came out in 2011.
Right.
And we can't get more current information. No one can, because the chemical industry successfully lobbied so that you can't find out how many chemicals are manufactured or imported in the United States. You cannot find out what are the chemicals in your cosmetics. They got the legislation passed that they don't have to list everything they put in cosmetics. So you really have to look for organic, and I'm sure you've had more podcasts on that topic in the past. I'm sure you have, right?
Dr. Tom O'Brien, I'm so grateful. I know we have the gift that we're going to be giving, and anywhere else you want us to go and find them. So I'm going to have the 3 steps to gut reboot. I'll also have the guide for the plants as well. But anywhere else you would love us to go and find you.
Oh, thank you. Our website's thedr.com, thedoctor.com. Just don't spell the word doctor out. And we've got lots of videos, lots of educational things there for people to begin exploring these topics. And my 2 books, The Autoimmune Fix, won a National Book Award. It's just a great explanation. I'm very proud of it. And You Can Fix Your Brain, #1 in 7 categories on Amazon for brain function. And they're both on this topic and they give you guidance. And You Can Fix Your Brain has 36 to-dos. Like, here's a list of 3 companies that sell glass storage containers so that you get rid of the plastic. You never store food in plastic again, right? Things like that.
Love
So
it.
thedr.com, that's our website.
Thank you so much.